again, where available. The other thing is, and we're not going to spend much time on them, but the Medicare incentives where the $29 billion is going out net, the savings, will require that meaningful use of certified EHR technology, which means that one needs to use the standards that will emerge from this process. What do we mean by certified electronic EHR technology? The bill is fairly prescriptive, but there's going to be a lot more definition. You know, the devil's in the details around how you define these words. These are the exact words of the Act. That qualified EHR technology, that for which incentives will be provided, will need to include patient demographic and clinical health information, such as medical history and problem lists, and then has the capacity to, but doesn't need to, do the things that are listed below around clinical decision support, physician order entry, capturing and querying information related to quality, and you'll see that theme throughout, and exchanging, we talked about this as we kicked off, exchanging electronic health information with an integration of such information from other sources. So pretty key. In the interest of time, I'm just going to roll up the next 12 slides or so and give you the 20,000-foot version. Okay, how the heck is this going to work? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is, let's see, let me roll here. Do you know what a FACA committee is? It's a federal advisory committee, so it'll be staffed within the federal government. Well, policy committee will be stood up, and there will be many appointments to this committee from majority and minority leaders in Congress, the president, and the secretary. But in addition to that, and I didn't put this in here in the interest of time, the Comptroller General will have 13 appointments. And if you look at the list, it represents the diversity of healthcare. So we're pleased to see that. Consumers, providers, health plans, tech vendors will be appointed to this committee. So what will they do? This committee's important because they will actually define the areas that will be covered, the priorities for both the funding and the standards. And Congress was pretty prescriptive about what those priority areas might be. And then secondly, they will prioritize those areas that need to be covered. So in a sense, if you think about a roadmap for how we might move standards forward, this committee is going to be key. The areas, if you look quickly at this list, and in the interest of time, you know, you're going to see a lot of functionalities that are related to privacy and security. There are many of these areas where we don't have standards today, actually. And I know we're working on them. I know that the many groups that have been in standards are working on them today. And so this policy committee is required by Congress to make sure that we have technologies that protect the privacy of information and promote security, including segmenting and protecting from disclosure specific and sensitive data. Hard to do, easy for some, hard for most. Things like accounting of disclosures, which is a key part of the privacy provision, and then addressing de-identification and other key areas. How does the government play a role? Actually, the national coordinator, who shall be appointed by the secretary, will take a leading position in establishing and operating the committee and make sure that all the work of the committee, the priorities, are aligned with other committees. And they need to move quickly. In fact, gosh, February 17th plus 90 days, we should see, I don't know how we'll do this, you know, a set of recommendations of those priorities that would emerge from the policy committee. That's very aggressive. Getting appointments through, not having a secretary. So those things need to happen in order to get to your 12/31 end date. So what else will happen related to standards? And I'm spending too much time on standards, particularly in the morning. You know, some key things that are different from what we're doing today. The first thing is we're going to have a new player in this. The government is going to play an increased role. The National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, does a lot of work in standards within government. They're going to play an expanded role. And actually, in consultation with NIST, the national coordinator will keep or recognize a program or set of programs for the voluntary certification of health IT. Okay, so we get the question a lot, well, what will happen? Well, let's talk about what will happen to the different entities once I get through this. Okay, let's talk about the Standards Committee. So we've got the Policy Committee setting priorities. Then they're going to set up a FACA body, again, a Federal Advisory Committee that is a Standards Committee, less prescriptive about how those folks are appointed, but for sure says that it needs to be diverse, just like the group of folks that you have around the table here in central Pennsylvania. Diverse, including consumers, providers, payers, and tech vendors and experts in privacy and security. So what they're going to do is they're going to look out there, look at the priorities that the policy committee comes up with, and actually identify standards, implementation specifications, and certification criteria for moving forward. They then recommend them to the national coordinator, who recommends them to the secretary for adoption, and hopefully we have standards at the end. So that's the idea. What's different than what we're doing today, as all of us are thinking through getting certified? One other thing, we talked about NIST being a new and big player, actually having about $20 million in prescriptive, appropriated funding as part of this. They're actually going to start testing these standards and building a conformance testing infrastructure, test beds, and they can work with folks in the private sector to do this. In talking with the staff, I think there was some nervousness as we move quickly down the road on standards. If we create them in a garage or a conference room and they don't actually work in the real world, we might have a problem. And so they took that to heart, and you'll see a lot of focus on making sure that the standards work. Again, the national coordinator will take a leading role and work with other bodies to make this happen. I'm going to keep moving because it's about 8:26. The question that we often get is, well, what will happen to HITSB, and what will happen to CCHIT, the certification body, and what will happen to the AHIC-2 successor body? The only body that is specifically referenced in the language is the National eHealth Collaborative, which is AHIC-2. I can't imagine, and again, it's going to be up to the national coordinator and the secretary, in order for us to move aggressively on building out standards that will support all of the things that need to happen in the law. I can't imagine one would not rely upon the work that has been done to date. I think it'll just be impossible to move forward on the standards. So my sense is that the work that HITSB is doing will continue to be leveraged. It's not clear in the future what the new secretary, and if we have a new national coordinator, will do in that regard. Regarding the AHIC successor, the language does say, and I glossed over it, it says nothing in this precludes, where is that guy? For both committees, nothing in this section shall be construed as prohibiting the National eHealth Collaborative, that's the AHIC successor, from modifying its charter, its membership, its functions, to be consistent so as to allow the secretary to recognize it as either the policy committee or the standards committee. And you'll see there's some conflicting language in the bill. It does say that it does need to be a FACA body, and FACA bodies don't reside in the private sector. NEHIC does reside in the private sector, and so there are a whole host of things that lots of folks are looking at, I'm sure lawyers pretty carefully, those that understand FACA, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, and ultimately it will be up to the secretary to decide. So I think things are up a bit in the air, but I think we continue to move forward, and I can't imagine, again, at the end of the day, that all the wonderful good work that's been done by folks at HITSB and CCHIT won't be leveraged. It just doesn't seem like it'll make sense. Let's talk about money, though, for a little bit. So I went back. So we've got that $2 billion bucket. And this is Janet Marchibroda. It's not prescriptive in the language. Let me tell you what is prescriptive in the language. Of the $2 billion, it says you got to give $20 million to NIST, remember the standards body, and you got to give at least $300 million to subnational and regional health information exchange, but it doesn't say how. So, those two bodies are covered. We know we'll see some funding, but we're not sure how it'll flow.